Got it.
So how have you been?
I've been well, David, really well.
You lost your friend a few weeks ago.
I lost that one a few weeks ago, and I lost another one this week who was only 32. And
Wow.
I had spent, I had tried to be of some use to him as a
Mm,
mentor. He had
mm,
a drug problem, and
mm,
I'm still not sure if he committed suicide or if he overdosed, but it's more or less the same thing.
mm, mm.
So that was on Tuesday. And, you know, I've lost a lot of people with the drugs thing.
Mm.
And there's something that always overwhelmingly hits me about that.
Mm.
And that is that for them, the suffering, the madness is over.
Yes.
And
Mm,
I got this, his name was Jimmy. And I
mm,
kept getting this image of Jimmy with a ear to ear smile on his face
mm,
and just this sense of liberation.
mm, mm.
Yeah. But it's such a handicap in a way. If you've got the affliction where if you
Yeah.
have one drink, you just don't know where it's going to end. And we all know those people from school. I mean, I was one of them. Or from, your teen years and just people who just shouldn't drink.
Mm, mm,
And yet everyone else has a drink and it's sort of that's what you do.
mm.
And it's one of these afflictions that creates it's as if you're putting a ball and chain on and you've got to go through life with just that little bit of,
Yes.
well, a lot. It's a lot. If you've got that, it's a big one to overcome.
It is. It's a poor investment really because it's sort of 10% of pleasure and about 90% of pain. But the way it's dressed in the mainstream, it's made to seem as though it's wonderful, but really it's, as you say, it's an affliction. It's because the human experience can be tough enough without having that to deal with as well.
Yeah.
But you're obviously very strong to to have
Well, it's
overcome.
not strength, David. It's grace.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who are much cleverer than I and have a much more reason to stop and
Mm,
have support and all these different things,
mm,
and yet they don't make it. And
mm,
I've had these, well, the first time
mm,
in that was like a profound spiritual event.
mm, mm,
And I had no reference point for what was happening, but I knew
mm.
one thing that the compulsion obsession to inject drugs was finished
Yes.
without anything. I didn't do anything. I had no idea what was happening. It was just a, let's say, a knowing, a deep knowing
Mm,
that for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be doing that. I had
mm,
other issues with drugs and alcohol later, as I said, eventually it took me out. But the actual injecting drug thing was over.
mm, mm,
Years later, um, I always tried to make sense of that. For many years, I tried to
mm,
understand
mm,
because it was, even though I would say today, it's probably the most profound event of my life,
mm,
but with
mm,
no reference points
mm.
and no context, it seemed like it could have happened. Just I had some sort of chemical imbalance in my mind because I'd been doing some, I had all sorts of theories what could have happened. But years
Yes.
later, I was listening to Joseph Goldstein, who's one of those, New York Buddhists.
Mm.
And I heard him say that the Buddhists talk about profound spiritual experiences and they rate them. Of course, they're
Yeah.
so academic about everything. And, you know, 2,500 years, they've had a long time to talk about everything. But he said that a true awakening experience would be one that you could one of the indicators would be there's an uprooting of defilements,
Mm.
and the other thing was a permanent change.
Mm.
So in this particular context that he was talking about, they
Mm.
would say that I had a awakening experience, and I would agree now.
Yes.
40 years later, that's what had happened. But at the
Mm.
time, I had no idea.
No.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because with astrology, there are particular planetary influences, and in Jyotish, which is Hindu astrology, there's a particular influence which is called Rahu, and because the planets they're called grahas, which means seizers, so they seize our consciousness, and they kind of run the show for us. And so with the Rahu influence, that is a very powerfully, sort of controlling influence. So it can put us into all sorts of strange behavior. It's a kind of it creates obsessions and
Obsessions and
obsessive.
compulsions, yeah.
Yes. And so,
Does it dovetail into the sort of astrology that I might have heard about, like the Western? Does the Hindu, how does it,
well,
it's not in conflict, is it? Like the religions?
no,
We're
it
right, you're
isn't.
going to hell.
No, absolutely not. No. With Western, it isn't quite so specific because with Hindu astrology, they're called the dasha periods, which are the main periods of the planet. So if you're running, so there could be a Rahu influence, which is obsessive compulsive, which could run for 18 years. When that comes to an end, the next period is Guru or Jupiter, which is a spiritual planet. So if you switch from the one to the other, the influence which was creating the obsessions and compulsions comes to an end, and then there can be a spiritual influence that comes in. So lots of people's spiritual awakening happens at that juncture when it's the end of the obsessive compulsive and then the beginning of the spiritual influence.
So that's interesting for my last block. So
Mm.
in 2001, when Arkie died, just that 2000, and
Yes.
I died in 2018.
Mm.
And that was definitely a period. And
Wow.
it was the same thing, more or less, 2018 till now.
Mm.
It was clear that was finished,
Yes.
and that at first I was like, it was as if I was in some stratospheric place.
Yes.
To
Totally different.
re-enter to my body
Mm.
was an incredible. I had
Mm.
been so out of it for so
Mm.
long
Mm.
that after I died, it was as if, yeah, you're coming as if a spaceship is coming back in from out of space and it's
Yes.
everything's burning off it. And it was
Mm.
just like a re-entering into
Mm.
my
Mm.
worldly vehicle.
Yes. Wow.
And just like, wow, a rebirth, really. It was,
Mm. Mm.
and just that it was over.
Yeah, that knowing, it's very clear, isn't it? Because you can just sense that whatever the energies were, they've just come to an end.
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes spiritual teachers interpret changes which take place, and they attribute them to certain kinds of practices or certain sorts of disciplines. But I think quite a lot of the time it's that there's a change in the influences which are coming to them. So they might be in a period which is very worldly, and then that changes to one which is much more spiritual. And they think the change is due to the practice, but it's actually to do with a change in the influence that's coming to them.
Well, yeah, it could be at least equally
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
because, the whole spiritual practice thing is a bit of a trap
Mm.
because there has to be somebody there that's getting
Yes.
somewhere as a
Yes.
result of the practice. And
Yes.
how that looks to me is it's a reinforcement of the
Mm.
separate individual. And he's
Exactly.
wanting something or she's wanting something.
Yes.
So something in the future.
Yes.
And it's a sort of we've only got now. So that basic thing.
It's a deception in a way, really, because it's the idea that you're not already there and you have to find it in the future. But it just perpetuates the idea of the separate self, really, as you well
That's what
know.
I think it reinforces. Ramana Maharshi said that.
Yes.
It reinforces the separate self.
Yes.
And those practices themselves are the barrier towards freedom.
Yes.
I'm paraphrasing. For,
No, but it's great to have that clarity because lots of things in the spiritual world, when we're in the seeking mode, they just keep on, and we remain engaged, and we can remain engaged for a lifetime or lifetimes. But to have that realization is very liberating. And as you noticed, that sense of grace which came to you, it didn't require any practice. The clarity just came to you.
no, I mean, I was definitely not management material. I did get a lot of things. I got away with a lot of things, is the way I describe it.
Mm.
I had quite a lot of, you know, white privilege. I was
Yes.
educated. I had a tool set
Mm.
that a lot of people don't have.
Mm.
And then I was able to get away with a lot
Mm.
somehow.
Mm.
And, but it was never satisfying. I was always running away from something or towards something.
Mm.
And I was going to leave no stone left unturned
Mm.
in my pursuit of what is happiness or what is all I was doing was a sort of not this, not that,
Yes.
you know.
Mm.
So it wasn't peaceful.
No. Well, you've had parallel experiences in a way, Jim, because you've had success in the world, but alongside that, um, spiritual progress as well, which has sort of come to you, and that's quite interesting, especially as you had other challenges along the way as well.
Yeah, and lots of I could say at 10 years old,
Mm.
the download came in
Mm.
and it was like, look around you,
Mm.
look at your family, look at your
Mm.
country, look at your
Mm.
school,
Mm.
look at your friends. It doesn't relate to you. This is not your life.
Mm.
You're going to have
Mm.
a you're going to have an adventure. But it was clear that, like the Joseph Campbell Dark Forest, that I was going to go in there without a map.
Mm.
And in there, I was going to encounter all sorts of demons and triumphs and
mm,
tribulations.
mm,
And there was no guarantee I was coming out.
mm,
And so it was terrifying and exciting at the same time.
mm,
And that was kind of a knowing. That was a knowing.
mm, mm,
And yeah, I think if I'd have got the whole story, I might have. It's hard to say. I mean, today I wouldn't change anything.
mm, mm,
I wouldn't assume to get involved
mm,
now
mm,
about anything.
mm,
But I had some illusion that, yeah, that I was going to do this adventure. And
mm,
I was
mm,
reckless about it as well. I was prepared to die because it was, it's almost like the Rolling Stones song. When you've got nothing to lose. I felt
mm,
it wasn't a choice. It
mm,
was just, this was going to be it.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that even though there are some fairly chaotic times in your experience, that there were these interventions of grace at various stages, and the most amazing things just came from nowhere, really.
Yeah.
So that can only happen where there is alignment with effortless being or the body of wisdom, whatever we wish to call it. But it's the spiritual dimension which was really um, having a kind of overriding influence on your whole life experience. So even if you were doing crazy things for a little while, there would be balance brought in different ways. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
It's like a divine intelligence that
mm,
even though we'd be on acid on a motorbike at 100 miles an hour, me
mm,
and my buddy, and it was the second hour. We were going into the second hour on the streets,
mm,
and he became a racing car driver, so he's really proficient. But we were on acid, and just a sort of trust
mm,
that we were going to make it home. Sort
sure,
of like a, yeah, just uh, let's say I was born very lucky. That's
mm,
that's how I felt. People
yeah,
would just shake their head. He's fallen on his feet again. Last time we heard this had happened and that. Now he's there doing that.
mm.
He's a fucking millionaire. It's just,
Yeah. Mm,
yeah. So it has been hard to find. The thing that I'm really appreciating with you, having these couple of talks with you, is that I feel like you get me.
mm,
And I feel like Paul and I were on the same page,
mm.
really deeply. And I do have one or two people,
Good.
but my sense is I'd like to have more people,
Yes.
but I just don't know how to go about it, you know?
Mm.
I feel like I've got a lot of experience.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, a lot to be able to help others with. And yeah, that's a gift. You do get called on, I feel, you because you have a
Yeah, the
lifetime of
time will
experience.
come,
Yeah.
sooner or later. Yeah,
But really it's whether there are certain people you meet in your life where they function mainly from their infinite nature, and then there's the human experience which goes alongside that.
yeah,
Um, and lots of people we meet, the human experience is predominating, so they've not really noticed their infinite nature. And the people you feel that bond with, it's because there's that mutuality, really, because you sense it in others when they, when they have that dimension, and yeah, it's something you just notice it really.
Yeah, and a lot of these dead drug addicts, a lot of these incredibly beautiful people and
Mm.
talented,
Yes.
um, just can't integrate into the mainstream.
No.
It's like I've been able to tightrope walk that one.
Mm. Mm. Well, usually people where there's addiction, they're usually hypersensitive, and the addiction arises because they're trying to cope with the world.
I'd say that was me.
Mm.
And I'd say that's why I don't spend a lot of time. I find it. So a friend of mine rang me and he wanted to talk about politics.
Mm.
And to me, it's completely uninteresting. I mean,
Mm.
I have a cursory, I do glance at the thing. I'm not, I'm not adverse to just having my finger on the pulse.
Mm. Mm.
I want to maintain, yeah, some semblance of, it's not even a question. But so I said to him, you can't, you won't be able to believe how uninterested I am in this conversation. I've known him since we were 10 years old.
So you can be pretty direct with him.
Yeah, and I said that to him. And he
Mm.
said, well, just listen, because I want to tell you about it. And I said, well, look, if I'm uninterested in listening and you want to talk about it anyway, I'm just going to hang up. So he
Using a
hung up.
by that.
But,
Mm.
it's like, it's like that for me. It's sort of painful.
Mm. Mm.
I can't take it seriously.
No.
It's anything could happen at any moment. My
Mm.
experience is that there's a soup for potentiality, like the 10,000 things,
Mm.
seen and unseen. And at
Yes.
any moment, anything could happen. Someone could drop a bomb in Kashmir, or someone could take over the Gaza Strip, or something, or Donald Trump could get elected, and anything could happen. I could die of a heart attack,
Mm.
whatever. Lots of things could happen and do, but it's not because of anything. It just is like that.
Mm. Mm.
And so,
Mm.
yeah, we're not talking about anything necessarily. We're just here, and then things arise or not.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's rare to have that with anyone.
Mm. Well, it's when you find your impersonal nature, really, because your true nature is an impersonal field. It's a field of infinite potential, and it's the most restful place to remain, really. And so to activate the personal mode and to engage in the world requires quite a lot of effort. But the more familiar we become with impersonal being, the more we like to just stay there.
Yeah, but you can do it, but
Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
choose not to do it, maybe. Like
Yeah.
I've been the boss of a lot of people, and I'm socially adept.
Mm.
I'm just antisocial. And I think I am very sensitive.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I'm picking up on people's distress. And most
Yes.
people are in a state of becoming,
Mm.
they're in a state of wanting. And
Yes.
wanting's, yeah, I mean, wanting is, if you're a drug addict and you've run out, you want something at a level that most people don't even understand, can't comprehend.
Yeah.
So it's the hungry ghost, it's the real, whatever
Fit.
the Hindus were talking about as well, the
Mm.
affliction, the obsession and compulsion.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter how much goes in, because even at that sweet spot, it's going to run out.
Mm.
It's going to, you just know I'm
Mm.
here, but
Mm.
fuck, 3 hours from now, I'm going to have to scrape together, and it's hell. It's just a state of wanting. And
Yeah.
most people have that. I don't know, but that's what I feel is happening.
Well, the world perpetuates that really because it's presenting the idea that our happiness lies in the future, and that we're all in a state of lack and we need to fill that void in some way.
We need to
And
do something.
mm,
Yeah.
and then um, different conditions have been defined, things like attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Well, really, that is only um, it's a result of not being present, really, because if you just remaining present in the simplicity and the energetic neutrality of presence, it's just that everything is arising and there's no turbulence, there's no feeling of lack, there's no sense that we need to go anywhere. But the
I
attention
think as a
deficit.
child, yeah, I could say from my experience,
Mm.
uh, they talk about children should be seen and not heard or something. But I
Mm.
think children should be known. And
Mm.
that takes a lot of effort for an adult to
Yes.
connect. And when a child, I feel like for me, I was, I was ADHD and oppositionally defiant. But for me, I was just on the go. But it's the sensitivity is just too raw.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so I went, I
Right.
wound up is the way I went.
Mm.
Yeah, but I don't see it as the amount of retinol getting prescribed on the planet would
Mm.
indicate that there's 10 times more children now suffering from this affliction, this ADHD or whatever you want to call it, and that they need to be medicated.
Mm.
And that makes no sense if it's genetic, because if it's genetic, it was 500 years ago, or, it's very slow genetics. It doesn't go 100%, it doesn't go 10 times in one generation.
No. Well, interestingly, the invitations into certain things like hyperactive disorder, they the genetics really are that there are tendencies to behave in a particular way or to accept certain invitations.
Yeah.
Um, but the way they're defined is they're made to seem as though they're personal and that we're afflicted by these things. But it's more that there's a tendency to accept certain kinds of invitations because everyone really is remaining in their infinite nature. And it's only if we're invited into the dualistic realm, with certain um, turbulent emotions or thoughts, that the experiences appear and that the personalization appears. But you can just see how the it's the personalization which makes it seem problematic because rather than seeing that there are tendencies, even if you say the tendency to have a drink, there can be genetic tendencies there.
Well, my sister's professor of medicine. She's a pediatrician. One of the things she's doing is fetal alcohol syndrome. So
Oh,
it would lend itself to, as we discussed, she and
mm,
I, we probably got a similar gene. We probably got a similar DNA string. But the thing is, there's epigenetics, what they're calling epigenetics, which is
yes.
basically causes and conditions.
Mm,
So there's DNA and then there's causes and conditions.
yes.
And um, it's not just a predisposition.
Mm,
There's more to the story. Is that what you were alluding to?
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really.
Have
But
you got
the
children, David?
I have a stepdaughter, and yeah, quite an interesting experience, really, with Alex. I I got to know her when she was 5, and she's now nearly 26. So um, it's quite interesting. She lives in Dubai, and she has a very good job. She's achieved lots of things in the world. But also even though she has her own direction, there's an understanding. She's seen that effortless being or grace has guided her life experience. So it's given her that sense that things work out for her and being attentive to things which come to her rather than pursuing things. And it's been quite an interesting experience, really, to see how things have developed in that way, because it is possible to have a worldly experience, but also to have that spiritual dimension. And
So this
it's
is my question. Uh, is it, do you think that we're in a stage of, oh, let's just pretend that you and I are we're on the zeitgeist of for whatever reason, uh, we're on the zeitgeist of the human species evolving
yes.
into realizing that they're not who they think they are, and that they're actually, and that it can be, uh, it could become more mainstream.
Hmm. Yes.
Because
Yeah,
I think if
definitely.
we don't, I don't know what's going to happen if we don't.
Well, you can see that really in the way um, it's almost like a movie. It's like the theme in a movie where, for instance, with spiritual practices years ago, people were involved in spiritual practices and they were keeping them bound, really. They were things like meditation and different.
To keep
Uh,
the thing going, the organization almost, and to create a hierarchy and all that stuff.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And so so there can be a withdrawal from the sort of conventional version of the dualistic realm, the materialistic approach, but then it can be a spiritual version of the same thing in a way, where we're gathering experiences and but maintaining personalization. But what seems to have happened recently is lots of people have seen that actually they are already in their true infinite nature. It's just that um, there has been the conditioning which has programmed them into
Well, I don't
maintaining.
know about you, but for me, it's been very difficult to shed that conditioning.
Mm,
I don't think it's easy. I mean, I believe that someone could spontaneously awake the way I did, but
yes,
without the context and everything, it took 40 years for it to finally land. I mean, for me to be sitting here now,
yes.
um, yeah, it was a long time and a
Yes.
lot of,
I think what's easier now is the distinction between impersonal being, which we already are, and the personal mode has become much clearer. So as it is with you, you're you're more comfortable resting as impersonal, effortless, timeless being and being alone. But also you're socially adept. You can interact with people, you can run a business, you can function in the world, and all that's available. But it's just that what happens now is you can regulate that on your own terms
yeah,
because you can see you've seen the distinction. You've seen that the foundation is that you're in your infinite, effortless, timeless nature. That's inescapable. You can't really move from there, but you can activate the personal mode, which is like a character in a play.
yeah,
And,
that's what I was
and
about to say. It's just like going on stage, and
yeah.
now you're the bottom, you're the back side of the donkey. I'd be good at that. Don't have to speak, no neighing, nothing, just
But it's much easier. And what you can see is because our infinite nature is always fully present, all we can do is pretend that it isn't.
yeah.
And in the pretending, we can get involved in all sorts of experiences which seem to be very compelling and compulsive. But actually, it's
As you
all,
get distance, it's like it becomes more and more apparent when you're involved in a thought or a feeling state.
yes, yes,
Because you've been resting there,
yes,
more or less.
yes.
As time goes on, it becomes clearer and clearer when you're buying into a thought pattern or a emotion feeling state.
Definitely, yeah. You can feel it energetically, can't you? Because it's effortless to remain in one's true
And
nature,
it's
but it's
stressful
required.
to be.
Yeah, exactly. You have to sort of crank it up. And in a way, like your conversation with your friend when he wanted a conversation about politics, that would require a lot of effort and concentration, and it wasn't very appealing to you, so you declined the invitation.
I decline the invitation, but being like that, you might decline the friendship as well.
That's a fact
So
sometimes.
yeah, that's a risk you run, but I'm prepared to take that gamble. If they're still calling me at this age after everything I've been through and they've been through, then probably it'll survive that one.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
just that I'm uninterested more and more
Mm,
in those.
mm,
Yeah, I don't know what they are.
mm,
It just seems that it's competitive rivalry. See, I think there's a unified field
definitely, yes.
and we're all contributing to it. So here we are, you and I, even through this vehicle,
Mm,
there's a field and we're in it. And it's
yes.
a very joyful field to be in and relaxing and effortless because we're not doing anything.
Mm,
I mean, I don't know, but I don't feel like I really want anything from you. I don't
no.
want to compete with you. And um, as a result, we can just relax. And that's what I think. It sounds simple, doesn't it?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. I'm fascinated with all these spiritual things and that you've learned and Hindu philosophy, Hindu astrology. I'm sure you've got reams and reams of, like you've been a meditator your whole life, more or less, haven't you?
Mm.
Yeah. So you've been hanging around.
Yeah, I think for each of us we have particular experiences and they're the ones which serve us most. And your experience has been different in some ways. You had a more worldly experience in some ways, and then it's been quite contrasting. But it's enabled you to see the clarity of your infinite nature really easily because you experience the worldly realm um, full on. And so it's been a great education, really. And with sometimes with spirituality, it's great to have the experiences, but they can also become addictive because you're chasing things like bliss and peace and silence and trying to make those permanent when actually they do come and go. But the 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 peace becomes more established when we're not seeking it in opposition to anything
Well,
because
it's the
with
peace without the peace that patheth understanding.
yes.
So you see, it's not a peace that you can know. and it's not a peace that you can get. It's a
No.
peace that is already.
Yes.
And in that sense, it's very simple.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Mm.
And when we go to the mind, it's yes, no, right, wrong, good, bad. It's like a binary computer. It
Mm.
just functions, a very sophisticated computer, but it does the same thing.
Yes.
Um, Competition, rivalry, like it's always
Mm.
better, worse, it's always evaluating and judging. It's too hot, it's too cold. It should be this. I wish, it's doing that thing
Yes.
innocently, but
Mm.
as long as you're involved on there, it's about knowing
Mm.
something. And Paul and I used to get to very quickly, nothing's the way you think it is. Nothing.
Mm.
And you don't know anything.
Mm.
Wow, what a relief.
Certainly is.
It's like love in a weird sort of way. It's a very loaded word, God and love and
Mm.
freedom and peace and all these things, but it is like that.
Mm.
So you were in TM, was it?
Yes, for over 20 years, yeah.
That's a serious commitment.
Mm. Well, it was a very good practice for experiences,
Mm,
but it does keep you on the treadmill of seeking because
mm,
it's the idea that we need to get to some destination.
yeah.
And but it keeps the dualistic mode going to some degree because we're having deep experiences in meditation, and then we're having to get back out into the world, and then we're trying to get back into the meditation, and
It's this thing of chasing transcendence.
yes.
Yeah. And things come and go.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
But as you say, the peace which is always there becomes apparent because it has no opposite, and when the dualistic pendulum of the seeking the peace and then back in the world, when that subsides, then the peace which is always there reveals itself, and that's quite that's a different experience. And then you notice that the the intelligence of our infinite nature begins to come forward much more, so it guides
It's
things.
interesting because it's before everything. It's before the meditator and
Yes,
before the experience.
yes,
And
definitely.
in our way of being, we need to do something.
Mm,
And
mm,
so the truth that's always the truth, or the ground on which we're walking on, is so close that it
mm.
gets overlooked.
Yes.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you couldn't say if people have been involved in the world, you can't say, well, actually, you are already in your true infinite nature because the conditioning is so much towards activity and practice and doing something to
And
get
they
somewhere.
might be more interested in getting um, a 70-foot yacht and
Yes. Mm.
becoming the CEO instead of the, CEF or whatever those things are.
Sure.
And you know what I mean? This is not relevant to people like that. That's the curious thing for me is has it always been that there's just a tiny percentage of humans on the planet that this becomes, it's not even, it becomes interesting to you. It's almost like it gets you. It's inconvenient in a lot of ways. But, and that's how it's going to always be. Or to me, it feels like, well, I get the sense that it could, I don't know. I don't know, but I would, like the thought of living in a world where if you rung up the receptionist at the bakery to order your croissant, and she was in this, she was just doing a thing, but she was here. Wow, what a planet we'd be living on.
Yes. Well, there are certainly many more people who seem to be disconnected from the dualistic realm, and that's yeah, it's quite an interesting transformation taking place. But it's difficult to speculate on. We can't really say where it's going, but
No,
it's definitely something happening.
and we don't know if that's what the planet needs or if we should go extinct like the dinosaurs.
No,
We don't know that
no.
even.
Well, fortunately, in the knowing of one's infinite nature, then the stories about the world and what's happening, they're not so important and not so interesting in a way because we already know that we're just resting as this field of infinite potential. So the particular movie which is running at the moment, it's quite entertaining, but it is we know it
I
is only
find
a
it
movie.
really entertaining. But then, you know, I'm able to, I'm not reconciling food and shelter and
No,
children raising and all those sort of things, which are practical things that need to be addressed.
yes. Well, you can see actually that a high percentage of the population, they're living a life of enslavement in some ways because to actually function in the world, to have a home and a family and food and a reasonable quality of life requires a huge investment of energy, in a conventional sense with things like work for most people because um, their infinite nature hasn't been noticed. So it tends to be that they take the option of effort, but it's not a great place to be, really.
No.
But the world presents that option as though it's the only one.
Yeah. It's funny,
So,
you know, I think like my nephew is getting married
hmm,
and, you know, he's the son of two doctors.
hmm,
So my sister and his grandfathers were doctors, his great grandfathers were doctors. So he's a doctor.
hmm,
And he's marrying his sweetheart.
hmm,
And there's a part of me that just thinks that everyone's going, oh, yeah, like he's 25 years old, get married.
hmm.
And, you know, we got married and look at us. Um, and we're happy. And it's like, hmm.
Hmm.
Like everything's a compromise, you know. We need to paint the mailbox, and I want to paint it red, and she wants to paint it blue. And it, after 6 weeks of arguments, it ends up getting painted purple, which nobody wanted. And this could be the last straw. You know, it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, when you look at the conditioned version of the dualistic realm, things like marriage, you can see they're actually serving the energy system because they're creating that sort of discord and conflict, which is fueling the matrix in a way. But because it's the conventional versions of life, things like having a career, working hard, having, children, and living in a fairly conventional way, is the way that we're serving the matrix most effectively, really.
Yeah.
But we're not told that because that's that's the way the matrix wants us to believe that we can be happiest. But it actually is creating the grounds for conflict because we get generally in marriages, we get set up. The dualistic realm allows people to come together and they have a little honeymoon period where it's all very harmonious. But then
Yes,
after a
well,
little,
that's biology tricking you into reproducing.
yes,
It's the biggest force that any
yes.
species, and the people like me just die out after one generation, you know. So anyone with my DNA, what are the chances? Yeah.
But yeah, for
But
your
you know, you and I, I'm going to say it, uh, there is a there. And if
Mm,
I can get to it,
mm,
anyone can,
yes, because we're already there.
because we're already there. And the big thing is the conditioning. You
Mm,
can, uh, the problem is it's a sort of faith or trust thing.
mm,
There's a lot of snake oil people out there and they're telling you this and that. And we're just two other people telling something else. But you know, and I know what we're talking about is freedom and
mm,
is truth and
mm,
is doable. It's
mm,
so doable, it's laughable.
mm.
Once it finally occurs to you, you go, shit, what was all that about? So, you
Mm,
know, I don't know. But proselytizing isn't the way there. Like, it's no point you and I grabbing a megaphone and going down onto the street corner and say,
no,
you must wake up.
no.
I'm
No,
adverse to that sort of thing.
well, it's fascinating just to see the way there is this other dimension of intelligence which is able to facilitate things, and it's intervened in your life experience and mine, and it just guides things effortlessly. And it takes a while to discover that the things of most value come to us without even trying. And but when we begin to see that, there is a possibility of helping others because it's there's some kind of resonance. There's some, there's a sense of a knowing which is already
You've got to go
present.
through the programming, haven't you? It's as if everyone's a robot and their binary computer's been programmed in a certain way. I've just got a
Yes,
flashing light, which is distressing to me on some level.
totally.
So I'm just going to either give it more power or turn it off. I think we'll turn it
Great.
off.
Yeah, that's so true.
I'm
That's
very sensitive about everything as I get
yeah.
older. Is that old age or is it just?
Well, in a way, because effortless being is predominating, it's quite good. You notice that there are certain things that when we're younger, I think we entertain discomfort much more willingly. But becoming familiar with effortless being and realizing it's a place where there's balance and ease and lightness, then there's more sensitivity in some ways. And so um, not having distractions. Um, Sometimes there are circumstances which we just need to accept, and that's fine as well. But but because your infinite nature is very familiar, you know how to remain there, and so distractions. It's quite nice just to turn them off, as you did with the light.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, is your community growing?
It is, yes, it is.
That's
It's
good.
it's quite interesting. with YouTube because YouTube doesn't seem to support what I'm doing wholeheartedly, put it like that.
Oh, in what sense?
Well, just because the what I put forward is quite radical, really, and it isn't conventional. So it isn't supporting the conventional view of life. So I think certain teachings get more support when they're more in alignment with the mainstream. Whereas if it's a bit, a bit peripheral, um,
So
then it.
they're deeming you a subversive, are they? Some powers that be.
Well, there seems to be something that's running because the number of people interested and the way my material is made available. It isn't. It doesn't
You
seem to
mean
be
on
made.
people's feeds and things like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Ah,
Mm.
yeah.
You can just see how the everything on YouTube is regulated, really.
What's a
So they,
business?
yeah, and things which support the mainstream tend to be promoted more, whereas the ones which aren't in alignment with that tend to be put on the back shelf. But it, if there's
You think they're going to come and nail you on a cross anytime soon?
no, I don't think so.
I hope not. Boy, the stakes were high in those days, weren't they?
They were. You never know, but
Well, I'll try and stop them. I'll fly over it. I know some people. Yeah, but I get that. If you're probably not making enough advertising money or you're just not tying the line in some way, and some marketing person says, you know what, these clowns are not helping our business. They don't know what you're saying or why you're saying it or any of that. They don't need to. They just, they're doing their maths and
yes.
statistics. It might not be as sinister as it
Hmm.
could be, but I wouldn't
No.
put that past them.
Well, with
I've
AI,
seen some stuff, David, in my life, I've
Hmm.
seen some amazing stuff. Like I lived in a country where, it's 30 years in Indonesia and it was wild.
Hmm.
I mean, historically, the CIA had put Suharto in there and he was their man. They were stopping communism or whatever they were doing. But anyway, the bottom line was if you were, so the police, the mafia, the politicians, and the army were the same people. And
Yes.
you were with them or you were against them. And one day I was in the rice field and I'd been trying to get a license for my hotel. And I'd offered this guy 25 grand if he could get me one. And his father was a general in Jakarta. And the next thing, up comes the road, a an entourage, like with motorbikes and people,
Hmm.
coming to see me because I wanted the hotel license. They were looking around, where's the new Hilton going to be built? And it was Jim in the rice field with long hair and no shoes on, mucking around in the rice field, building my houses. And um, my father had been in Indonesia and he had put some Indonesian students, done an exchange, and Suharto had given him a medal.
Wow.
He got the highest civilian honors that you could get. So the next thing, these generals show up. They were the wives of the generals. They thought they'd just have a hotel. and get their percentage or whatever it was. That this guy needs help. He's a foreigner. We'll make it happen. But there was nothing for them, so they left. But before they left, one of my guys, Balinese rice farm, said, "Oh yeah, his father got a medal from Sahara." And the next thing, they later on that day they came back, and I was like, "Oh God, what are they doing? They're back here. This is going horribly wrong." But basically, they arrived and they said, "We've decided to help you."
Hmm.
And my experience in Indonesia went from being hustled by the local authorities because I didn't have the right paperwork. And I wasn't allowed to build. As a foreigner, you could have one house. I already had six by then or something. And they were going to do whatever they were going to do to me and take the houses and all the way it goes. And suddenly everything changed in a way you can hardly imagine.
Mm.
Like, uh, those people, they could do anything they like. I mean, anything. And if you're a friend of theirs, you can't really do anything guaranteed,
Mm.
but you can probably get away with it. And,
Sure.
it was just the stuff I saw there was just, but all I realized was we're just more sophisticated in the West. At least
Yeah.
it's clear there.
Yes.
You know, David Bingham is annoying me. Here's $1,000. Have him disappear, or
Yeah.
whatever it was. That's a simple equation. But here, it's just much more sinister. But basically, justice doesn't really exist. It's
No.
who's got the better lawyers and who knows who, and it's the same thing. It's just a more sophisticated version of it.
Yes.
And the world, that underground um, drug world. Wow. You see people really performing at their worst, me included.
Well, it's been great to have a conversation with you, Jim. It's been fantastic. Quite
So
unusual
good.
in many.
Yeah. I'd like to have more conversations with people.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm sure there are lots of people who would like to speak with you.